In the heart of the small town, the sheriff was more than just a badge and a gun. He was a symbol of safety for every family, a protector against chaos. The townsfolk looked up to him, trusting that he would uphold the law and ensure peace in their lives. With each sunrise, he donned his shiny star and stepped out into the world, embodying the weight of responsibility not only for the laws but also for the hearts of the people around him. He moved through Main Street with an air of authority, greeting neighbors with a nod and an earnest smile. Children played on porches, waving as he passed by, while shopkeepers displayed their wares under his watchful eye. Yet, beneath the surface of cherubic innocence lay hints of tension. Disturbances had begun rippling through the town. A few petty thefts here, some loud disputes there, enough to stir silent fears that something darker was brewing. The sheriff knew what it meant to stand between order and disorder. He had seen enough trouble on his watch to appreciate the fine line he walked daily. On one hand, there was the urge to demand respect and instill fear. On the other, he sought to be a compassionate figure who understood that everyone had stories worth listening to. But as shadows grew longer and discontent simmered, his resolve would soon be tested in unimaginable ways. Little did he know that his next movement would define not just his fate but echo throughout the town forever, setting off events that would linger long after the smoke cleared. As the days passed, whispers of unrest began to swirl through the small town like autumn leaves caught in a gust of wind. It started with a few petty crimes, vandalism in the park and a couple of stolen bikes, but soon escalated into more serious conflicts. Neighbors who once shared friendly cups of coffee now exchanged tense glances, their conversations growing hushed at the sheriff's approach. The local saloon, usually filled with laughter and music, became a breeding ground for rumors. Groups of men gathered around tables, their voices low but intense as they debated everything from rising crime rates to the sheriff's ability to handle the situation. Some demanded stricter enforcement, while others questioned his fairness, suggesting that he favored some townspeople over others. Among those embroiled in the tension were two prominent families, the Millers and the Johnsons, who had a long-standing feud over land boundaries. Their arguments had gone from mere words to heated confrontations in public spaces, drawing curious onlookers and raising concerns about potential violence. The sheriff knew that if this family feud erupted into a brawl, it could spiral out of control. In addition to these conflicts, there were whispers in the shadows about a group that had recently moved into town. New faces were appearing, some thought to be troublemakers looking to exploit the unrest. As the sheriff patrolled Main Street, he felt the weight of every anxious gaze upon him. The air was thick with uncertainty, and he could sense that something was about to break. A confrontation was on the horizon, and he would have to act decisively to restore peace before it slipped further away. The sun hung low in the evening sky, casting long shadows across Main Street as the sheriff made his rounds. The familiar sights of the town felt charged, anticipation crackling in the air like a summer storm. He could feel it in his bones. Something was about to burst. The nervous chatter of townsfolk faded into an uneasy silence, and he wished he could shake off the tension that clung to him like a heavy coat. As he approached the saloon, voices erupted from inside, rising above the usual din of laughter and music. With his hand instinctively resting on the holster at his side, he stepped through the door, eyes scanning the room for signs of trouble. Inside, a hastily formed circle surrounded two figures. A confrontation between members of the Miller and Johnson families had turned into a shouting match. Tension thickened as fists clenched and faces flushed with anger. Pushing forward, the sheriff raised his voice. "All right now, let's settle this down." But before he could get a grip on the chaos, someone hurled a mug across the room. It shattered against the wall, sending people ducking for cover. In that moment, everything changed. The sheriff saw it clear as day. One man pulled out a knife while another brandished a bottle. The bar's atmosphere shifted from rowdy to deadly in an instant. Heart pounding, he faced an unexpected threat, with divided loyalties among bystanders and fear coursing through him. Choices loomed large in front of him. He needed to act quickly but wisely, knowing that this split-second decision would leave consequences echoing far beyond this tense moment. In the chaos of the saloon, the sheriff's instincts kicked in. The tension reached a breaking point as he saw the man with the knife lunging toward his rival, who brandished the bottle like a weapon. Time slowed as the sheriff's heart raced. He knew he had to act. With a swift motion, he drew his weapon, feeling the weight of it in his hand and the stares of every person in the room boring into him. "Stop!" he shouted. But his voice was lost amid the cacophony of shouts and crashing glass. In that split second, he made a choice. The sheriff's finger tightened on the trigger. A loud bang filled the air, drowning out all other sounds. The shot echoed through the saloon, reverberating off the walls and freezing everyone in place. The bullet struck its target, an arm that had been raised in aggression, and the knife clattered to the ground as the man fell back, howling in pain. Silence enveloped the room, a heavy blanket following the gunfire. Shock hung in the air like smoke, mingling with fear and disbelief. The sheriff stood there, breathing heavily, his mind racing to comprehend what had just happened. He could see wide eyes staring at him, some filled with fear while others held judgment. The gravity of his action crashed down on him like a wave. He had fired his weapon to protect, yet now uncertainty loomed like an ominous cloud. Within moments, chaos transformed into chaos anew. People rushed toward exits, some shouting for help while others fumbled for their phones to call for medical assistance. The sheriff felt a mix of adrenaline and regret coursing through him, knowing that this moment would forever change not only his life, but also the lives of everyone who witnessed it. As the chaos began to settle, the sheriff stood in the center of the saloon, his heart pounding in his chest. The sound of panicked voices faded into a haunting silence, leaving only the echo of the gunshot lingering in the air like a specter. He surveyed the scene before him, his stomach twisting with a deep sense of regret. The injured man sprawled on the floor, clutching his arm, while eyes around him brimmed with shock, disbelief, and fear. The sheriff felt the weight of every gaze upon him, piercing through his resolve and laying bare the gravity of his actions. He had drawn his weapon to protect, to restore order, but now he questioned whether he had done more harm than good. Each breath seemed heavy with regret as he thought about the lives that had been changed in a single, reckless moment. How would he face the families involved? What would this mean for the community? His mind raced with thoughts of the wounded man and what would happen next. Would he recover? Would this spark more violence? He couldn't shake off the nagging feeling that he had crossed an irreversible line. The sheriff's role had always been to bring peace, yet today he felt like an agent of discord. As people flooded out of the saloon, some helping each other while others fled in fear, a deep sorrow settled in his chest. How did it come to this? The smoke from the gunfire mingled with the air, wrapping around him like a reminder of choices made and paths taken. In that moment, he understood, no matter how justified his actions might have felt at the time, they would echo through his life and the town forever. In the days that followed the incident at the saloon, the sheriff found himself grappling not only with regret, but also with the weight of judgment that loomed over him like a dark cloud. Every conversation he overheard carried whispers of his actions, echoing through the town like ripples across a still lake. People were quick to form opinions. Some viewed him as a hero who had acted decisively to protect, while others saw him as reckless, endangering lives with a single choice. The sheriff had always understood judgment in a courtroom setting, where verdicts were determined by evidence and arguments. But this was different. Here, judgment was personal and raw. It lingered in the eyes of the townspeople when they passed him on the street, in their hushed tones as they discussed their feelings about safety and law enforcement. The sheriff felt like he was standing trial every day, not just for his actions but for who he was as a protector. Even in his own home, those judgments weighed heavily on him. He would sit in silence, troubled thoughts swirling in his mind as he considered what it meant to hold such authority. Was he truly serving justice? Or had he veered into territory that could unravel everything he had built? The lines between right and wrong blurred in his mind, making him question not only his recent decisions but also his intentions. As he walked through the town that now felt foreign to him, the echoes of those judgments followed closely behind. The verdicts rendered by society and his own conscience would echo long after the smoke had cleared from that fateful day, leaving a lasting reminder of just how fragile trust can be. As days turned into weeks, the consequences of the sheriff's hasty decision began to unravel in ways he had never anticipated. His relationship with the community, once built on trust and respect, became a fragile thread. People who had once greeted him with warm smiles now avoided his gaze, whispering among themselves as he passed. The friendly nods from shopkeepers were replaced by tense silence, and children who used to wave at him now turned away, their innocence tainted by fear. At home, the atmosphere grew heavy with unspoken words. His family felt the strain of his turmoil. They watched him retreat into himself, wrestling with guilt and confusion. Conversations that were once filled with laughter became shadowed by unease as he struggled to explain the burden he carried. He felt isolated, unable to share the depth of his regret or the weight of judgment pressing down upon him. The injured man's recovery was slow, and news of his condition rippled through town like a storm. Some blamed the sheriff for ruining lives while others defended him, yet no one truly understood how deeply this incident had affected him personally. He had crossed a line that day, one that left permanent scars on both his conscience and those around him. With each passing day, the sheriff realized that his actions had not only impacted one life, but had rippled out to affect families, friendships, and the very fabric of community life. Trust lay fragmented at their feet, a reminder that decisions made in haste could echo far beyond their moment, altering lives forever. As he walked through familiar streets now tinged with uncertainty, he understood that healing would take time, not just for others but for himself as well. As the sheriff sat alone on the porch of his home, the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm glow that contrasted sharply with the turmoil brewing inside him. He had spent countless nights replaying the events of that fateful day, each recollection like a dagger piercing his heart. If only he could turn back time and choose differently, perhaps to step in earlier, to de-escalate the situation without resorting to his weapon. The weight of those what-ifs hung heavily in the air, suffocating and relentless. In this quiet moment of reflection, he realized that seeking redemption meant more than just wishing for another chance. It required action and understanding. The sheriff knew he needed to confront not only his own demons but also the community he had hurt. He began to think about how he could rebuild trust, maybe by holding town meetings to listen to grievances or starting programs that brought everyone together to heal. He envisioned reaching out to the injured man and his family, offering sincere apologies and support as they navigated recovery. It would be a long road, but he understood that true redemption lay in taking responsibility for his actions and showing vulnerability rather than hiding behind his badge. With each passing day, he resolved to engage more with his community, walking down Main Street not just as their sheriff but as a neighbor who cared deeply about their well-being. He wanted them to see that while he had made a grave mistake, he was committed to learning from it and doing better. As dusk settled in, he felt a flicker of hope amidst the shadows, a sign that even in darkness, there was potential for light and renewal if one was willing to seek it. As the sheriff continued his journey towards healing, he reflected deeply on the powerful lessons etched into his heart. He understood that every decision carries weight. Each choice can ripple outward, influencing lives in ways one may never fully realize. In his case, a rush to judgment during a moment of chaos led to profound consequences, an irreversible course of events that altered the fabric of his community and forever changed him. The smoke from that fateful shot became a metaphor for how past actions linger, creeping into corners of memory and consciousness where they haunt and remind. While he sought redemption, he also learned that accountability was not merely about accepting blame but embracing the responsibility to make things right. Each day provided new opportunities to demonstrate that he could learn and grow from his mistakes. In conversations with townsfolk, he learned to listen, to hear their fears and hopes for the future. He knew change wouldn't happen overnight. It would require patience and commitment. However, he hoped that by acting with sincerity and transparency, perhaps the shadows cast by his past could slowly dissipate. As he walked through the town, he began to recognize the importance of community in navigating life's challenges. No one is an island. Together they could foster understanding and rebuild trust, ensuring history would not repeat itself. In embracing this collective journey toward healing, The sheriff discovered not only his path to redemption, but also reaffirmed the resilient spirit of the community he loved dearly. Ultimately, he realized that while smoke may linger after a fire has burned, it is possible to chase it away with earnest efforts rooted in accountability, empathy, and the unwavering hope for a brighter tomorrow.